Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. In this video, we're doing the first Q&A video. So we're going to answer the questions that were received in the previous Q&A video, which wasn't the first one because it was the 0th one where we were just asking for questions basically for the first time. So here we go, let's look at some questions. Okay, so our first question we have here is a really simple one. It says, how do you organize your notes? And so the answer to that is that I am not a very good note taker or organizer in general. That's not really the kind of student I am, I guess. The only thing that I use pen and paper for in regards to my Japanese studies is basically just practicing kanji. When I need to refer back to things that I've already learned, I either just refer to textbooks or online websites, or I guess you could call this video channel in general my notes and organized in their most organized fashion. So yeah. Our second question is a really good one actually. It is, how do you improve Japanese comprehension? I can hear certain words but can never really comprehend everything someone is saying because it's so fast. And so this is a problem that I'm pretty sure every single person starting off learning Japanese experiences. I too experience it sometimes as well still, particularly when I'm listening to kind of fast-paced Japanese stuff such as news reports, I guess. So from my experience, the key thing here is to just continually keep on expanding your vocabulary as well as your knowledge of grammatical patterns. That's kind of why when I started this video channel, I put the focus on grammatical patterns because that's a really important thing, and vocabulary is kind of a thing that people can easily learn by themselves. So a really short anecdote before I get back to actually answering this question on a technical aspect. At various points early on in my Japanese studies, I would learn a new grammar pattern basically. I'd go home and I'd watch anime and I would hear the grammar pattern in the episode of anime that I'm watching, and I would be like, oh wow, what a coincidence. The day that I learned the grammar pattern, it's used in an episode of anime that I watched. Well, that actually wasn't the case at all. It was that grammar pattern was being used constantly in episodes of anime that I had already watched. I just didn't realize it until I actually learned what the grammar pattern is. And so what I'm saying is that the same thing applies here, because you can't change the speed at which people you're talking to are talking themselves. What you're gonna have to do is you're just gonna have to keep expanding that area in which you can recognize certain words. So the more of those certain words that you can recognize in a conversation, the more they'll immediately register in your head, you'll know what they mean, and that gives you more time to process the words that you may not know, or not just words, but also grammar patterns. And so to that effect, you just have to keep expanding your vocabulary and your knowledge of grammar, as well as your knowledge of common phrases, and you'll gradually get better and better at being able to keep up with native speakers, basically. And that being said, I know there are countless grammar patterns to know. That's why you should definitely prioritize the ones that most relate to basically basic sentence construction. Just to give a really bad example off the top of my head, let's relate this to one of the first grammar patterns that we covered on this channel, which is just basically the basic sentence construction: subject plus the particle wa plus direct object plus particle o to denote direct object, and then the verb action. So if we know that general construction right there, then maybe when the person you're talking to says a sentence and the first word in that sentence is something that you've absolutely never heard of, but you know it's the subject of the sentence because of the sentence construction, it's followed by the particle wa or ga or something like that, then maybe you'll just write that off as a name and you won't have to bother knowing exactly what it means if it's just someone's name. Then further, if the last word in that sentence ends with something like ta, and you can assume that it's a verb, then that ta will probably denote that that verb is in its past plain form or something like that, and so on. So you use these little hints based on grammar and kind of do a process of elimination of the whole dialogue so that you can immediately register what is familiar to you, so you can have more time to process the things that are less familiar. Not too sure if that answered your question in the way that you wanted it to answer, so feel free to ask a follow-up. Our next question is, do you have any tips on apps or websites that would help improve speaking Japanese? So the answer to that is unfortunately no. I don't have too much app experience with my history of learning Japanese, studying Japanese, and if you're talking about speaking Japanese, improving your speaking Japanese, that's actually probably going to be much harder to find than just general Japanese learning for apps and whatnot. I have seen a lot of startup websites and whatnot focused on teaching languages where you can talk to native speakers and whatnot, but it's hard to know which one of those services is the best, or whether They're just good at all. My personal recommendation would be to try to find a basically a community in your local area where you'll be able to speak with fellow Japanese learners or even natives, hopefully. I know that might be hard depending on where you're based, but that is definitely the best experience to have it live. And also, I do believe some people try to do pen pal system, and I haven't tried that myself, but that might be something to look into. But in terms of apps, I am not too sure on that at all, so sorry about that. Our next question is a pretty similar one. It is, what are some specific resources that you would recommend students use? They can be books, YouTube channels such as yours, which I enjoy, thank you, mobile apps, websites, or any of the sort. So me personally, the only resources that I still kind of really use are recur, which is an add-on for web browsers that lets you hover over Japanese text and it'll basically provide you with the definition and the kana for it, which is really useful when you're using the net a lot to aid in your Japanese learning, such as reading Japanese articles online and stuff like that. That is a really good resource to use. And also jisho.org, which is basically just a dictionary. Other than that, I'm not sure I can recommend resources that I can guarantee with my own personal satisfaction. There are some popular resources that are used by the Japanese learning community, such as things like Anki, which is kind of like a flashcard studying software. In terms of websites, I know that Tae Kim's Guide to Japanese Grammar is one that is actually well used and well referred to, as well as Maggie Sensei, which is something that I referred to a decent amount back in the day and just has an absolutely insane amount of material and examples there. So check those out. I do plan on compiling a list of resources eventually, and hopefully it'll be more informative when that comes out. And now for the last question that we have for this video is, are there any verb conjugations that you would classify as not common, extremely rare, or practically unnecessary to learn? So to that, I would say yes, just based on my experience from delving into classical Japanese and learning all the ancient stuff and whatnot. But the thing is that you probably won't come across them if you're not explicitly looking for them, because that happens to be the case. They're not very necessary to learn, so you probably won't come across them if you're just trying to learn modern Japanese. So I think a better way to answer this question is to answer the opposite of it and just list the verb conjugational forms that are the most essential. So here we go. So we have the dictionary form, which is definitely important, the polite mas form, which is definitely important, the pre-mas form, which is pretty important. You'll see it every now and then in grammar patterns such as pre-mas form plus ni plus a going verb to mean to go somewhere to do something. We have the negative nai form, that's definitely essential. The polite negative form is essential. The te form is essential. The perfective ta form is essential. The volitional form, pretty essential as well. Potential form, essential. Conditional ba form, pretty darn important. Passive form, conditional tada form. The causative form, the imperative form, which is pretty essential. And then last but not least, we have the causative passive form, which isn't too common, but is still, I would say, considered basic knowledge. We've kind of neglected to cover that on this channel. We haven't covered that yet, so we will eventually. And yeah, that seemed like a darn lot, but believe it or not, those are all the commonest ones. But yeah, you should be good with those if you're just trying to be a functioning modern day Japanese speaker. Okay, so that wraps up the questions that we have for this Q&A. Of course, hopefully you learned something or got some good advice. Do post some more questions in the comment section of this video so we can make another one and answer the questions on people's minds, if I can answer them, if I'm qualified to answer them. So yeah.